Why the smartest people prefer to be alone. They don't avoid people because they hate them. They avoid people because they see them too clearly. They see the masks, the performances, the noise. They hear the small talk that means nothing. They feel the fake smiles before anyone else notices the silence behind them. That's why the smartest people often sit at the edge of the room. Not because they're weak, but because they're awake. And when you're awake in a world that's addicted to distraction, everything becomes too loud, too shallow, too performative. Most people think the loudest person in the room is the strongest, but real strength is the one who doesn't need the room at all. Because when your mind is sharp, your tolerance for surface level dies quickly. You don't crave attention. You crave clarity. You don't chase crowds. You protect your peace. And that peace, it's not loneliness. It's insulation from chaos, from drama, from energy that drains instead of builds. So next time you see someone choosing silence over spotlight, don't mistake it for weakness. That's a mind too full for nonsense. That's someone who doesn't need the world to see them to know exactly who they are. Solitude isn't isolation, it's refinement. When you're alone, you're not escaping people. You're escaping the noise they bring with them, the opinions, the projections, the expectations. Smart people don't fear loneliness. They fear dilution. They fear what happens to their thoughts when they're constantly absorbing everyone else's. Because in solitude, they think clearer. They feel deeper. They remember who they are without needing a mirror. But the world doesn't celebrate that. It celebrates noise, visibility, hyperconnectivity. So when someone chooses distance, they're called antisocial, cold, arrogant. But what they really are is free from the emotional labor of carrying shallow connections, free from performing intelligence just to be understood, free from rooms full of people who speak a lot but say nothing. Because the smarter you are, the less impressed you become by performance, and the more drawn you are to stillness. Not because you think you're better, but because you're tired of pretending you're not. Most people don't understand solitude because they've never truly met themselves in it. They fill every quiet moment with noise, music, messages, movement. Not because they're busy, but because silence confronts them with the one person they've spent their whole life avoiding, themselves. But the intelligent ones, they lean in. They don't just tolerate the silence, they study it, because they know something most people don't. Clarity is loud in quiet spaces. In solitude, they hear what the world drowns out, their real fears, their buried desires, the hard truths no one else is willing to say out loud. And once you hear that truth, you can't go back to fake conversations. You can't laugh at things that don't move you. You can't sit in crowds and pretend you belong when your soul is somewhere else entirely. That's not arrogance. That's awareness. And the more aware you become, the more you realize solitude isn't empty. It's honest. And honesty is rare in a world built on noise. They call it loner energy. They say, you're too quiet. You think too much. You're too distant. But what they don't realize is, some people aren't distant because they lack love. They're distant because they have depth. Depth that doesn't fit in shallow spaces. Thoughts that can't be said in a sentence. Feelings that would drown anyone who's only ever lived on the surface. So the intelligent ones? They choose solitude not because they want to be alone, but because they refuse to be misunderstood. You stop offering pieces of yourself to people who only know how to take. You stop opening your mind in rooms where the loudest voice wins, not the sharpest thought. And you learn, peace isn't in people. Peace is in presence. Yours. You don't need someone to validate your thoughts to know they're worth thinking. You don't need to explain your silence to justify its wisdom. You've realized, not everyone deserves access to your mind, because a mind like yours, it's not built for distraction. It's built for vision, and vision doesn't grow in noise. You weren't always like this. You used to try, to fit in, to engage, to make yourself smaller so others wouldn't feel threatened by your depth. You laughed at things that weren't funny. You nodded along with ideas that made your stomach turn. You stayed in rooms that drained you, just to prove you weren't difficult. But every time you did, you felt something break. Not loud, not sudden, just a slow erosion of self-respect, of truth, of energy. Until one day, the noise became unbearable, and silence, the same silence you used to fear, became sanctuary. Not because you gave up on people, but because you gave up on pretending. Now, you crave quiet, not as an escape, but as a return. Because when you're finally alone, you're finally honest. You don't have to fake interest. You don't have to translate your thoughts. You don't have to shrink your intensity for the comfort of shallow company. You've realized, if connection costs you your authenticity, it's not worth it. And that kind of clarity, it only comes when the crowd is gone. There's a strange shift that happens when you choose solitude. At first, it feels like loss. You look around and realize how much of your life was built around staying available to everyone but yourself. But then, something clicks. You're no longer reacting. You're observing. You're no longer pulled into every conversation, every opinion, every emotional storm that doesn't belong to you. You start protecting your time like it's sacred, because now it is. You guard your mornings. You unplug from noise. You stop explaining your silence. And people notice. They say you've changed, that you've become too private, too intense, too much in your head. But what they don't understand is, you finally know what's in your head. You've faced it, cleaned it, claimed it. And now, you won't let anyone walk through it with muddy feet, because your peace is no longer for sale. Your presence is no longer automatic. And your energy? It's earned. Solitude didn't isolate you. It introduced you to the version of yourself that doesn't need the noise to feel alive. You start to realize you don't miss the noise. You don't miss the small talk, the forced laughs, the feeling of performing just to feel accepted. Because now you've tasted something rarer than connection, alignment. You wake up and your thoughts are yours again. You move and your choices feel intentional. You speak less, but when you do, you mean it. Solitude has sharpened you, not into someone cold, but into someone clear. You're no longer desperate to be understood by those who can't even understand themselves. You're no longer begging to be invited, included, accepted, because you've accepted yourself. And here's the part no one tells you. Once you find peace in your own presence, chaotic company becomes unbearable. Conversations without substance feel like noise pollution. Spaces that require you to shrink feel like cages. So you choose your solitude again and again, not because you hate the world, but because you finally love yourself enough not to lose your mind in it. Solitude doesn't make you lonely. It makes you sovereign. People will notice, not your silence, but your absence from things that once drained you. They'll sense the shift, the way you don't rush to respond, the way you no longer explain your choices, the way you protect your energy like it's not up for negotiation. And it unsettles them, because your detachment isn't passive, it's powerful. It says, I don't need this chaos to feel real anymore. It says, I've found peace where you never thought to look. They'll try to pull you back, to guilt you with phrases like, you've changed, you've become distant, you think you're better than everyone. But no, you don't think you're better. You just know your value now, and that changes everything. Because once solitude teaches you how to be full on your own, you stop tolerating half versions of love, attention, and friendship. You no longer accept being tolerated just to avoid being alone, because you've seen what's on the other side of noise. And it's not loneliness. It's clarity. It's strength. It's peace with nothing to prove. You look back and wonder how you ever lived like that, surrounded by people, but starving for depth, constantly available, but never truly known. You thought you needed connection to survive, but what you needed was space to breathe, space to think without interruption, to feel without filtering, to exist without adjusting. And now that you've had that space, you can't unsee the truth. Most of what we call connection is just distraction with eye contact. So you stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop explaining why silence feels better than shallow. Because the right people, they'll meet you in the quiet. They won't demand noise. They won't need performance. They'll sit with you in stillness and see everything. That's how you know. You've graduated from needing to be surrounded to needing to be seen. And if the world calls that loneliness, so be it. Let them call you distant. Let them call you different. Because distance isn't always disconnection. Sometimes it's elevation. This is what they never tell you. Solitude doesn't break you. It shows you who you were before the world told you who to be. And once you meet that version, you stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop handing out pieces of yourself just to feel wanted. Because now you understand, you were never too distant. You were just too deep for people who feared their own silence. You were never cold. You were just tired of melting for people who only showed up to take warmth from you. You were never hard to love. You just stopped making yourself easy to use. And the truth? Most people don't want you. They want the energy, the wisdom, the calm, the mystery that solitude gave you. But they don't want to do what it takes to earn it. So when they can't reach you anymore, they call you names. They say you've changed, but you haven't changed. You've returned to your peace, to your mind, to yourself. And from this place, you don't need validation. You don't need permission. You don't need company to feel complete. Because solitude didn't take anything from you. It gave you everything. And if the price of truth is distance, pay it, gladly, because nothing costs more than being surrounded by people who make you feel alone.